perspective on these events. I myself am on the board of the Highland Society of Antigonish because I see that there's an open door of people who are interested in knowing more about the history of the society, about the history of Gaelic in North America, in Nova Scotia, and in the county. So, you know, I definitely see many opportunities for Gaelic material, Gaelic tradition being reincorporated in the Highland Games. There's no reason why that kind of synergy and cooperation can't happen. It's just that you are fighting an uphill battle because of the misinformation and the misrepresentation of generation upon generation who have been removed from the language and culture. And unfortunately, a lot of this passes as scholarship, and I'm afraid I have to point out a couple of problems with a couple of quotes that Ms. McLeod used. Highlanders were not just a single homogeneous culture. There was certainly an oral-based folk culture, but there was also a literate elite culture of which there were many members in this county who came originally over. The Bard MacLean was one of the last official professional clan bards in Scotland. The Piper McGillivray was also had an official position as a piper and bard to a clan chieftain. So these were not just ignorant peasants. These were people who had living memory and living experience of a very prestigious, educated, cultured culture. They weren't just a bunch of peasants. So this is a common misperception that we really need to really directly address. Another one is this idea that kilts and bagpipes were banned. Well, the kilt and the tartan were banned for civilian males after Culloden, but the bagpipe was never banned. It was simply a part of the elite culture, which trickled down to the vernacular culture. But really, kind of the main comments that I have really address some of the ideas or claims that Mr. Wallace presented. And I think there's a lot of really problematic questions we have to come to the core of and ask about these issues, like, you know, who are we? There's no such thing as a Scottish gene. There is no Scottish race. The Scots, like any other people, are a culture and a language group. Is a person still a Frenchman if he speaks no French? I mean, how meaningful is that? Is a person still a Highlander if they have no, you know, contact with Highland culture or Gaelic or anything? This is a very dubious kind of notion that there's a Scottish race. There is no Scottish race. As Lewis was pointing out previously, a lot of the people that we now consider Gaels and Highlanders came from other places. You know, the Grants, the Frasers, the Chisholms, these are all groups that had representatives from other countries who integrated and became Gaelicized over time. It has nothing to do with genes. It has to do with language and culture. So similarly, looking at this whole idea of identities, Lowlanders and Highlanders, it was certainly not the case that there was a homogeneous Scottish people who were all friendly with each other, you know, in Nova Scotia. The Highland Society was exclusively for people of Highland background. Wallace's would not have been included, I'm afraid. If you look at the poetry composed by the Gaels in this county, they were very aware of the fact that they were looked down on by English speakers, regardless of whether they were English or from the lowlands of Scotland. They were aware of prejudices that they had to overcome. So this whole notion that there's some kind of generic Scottish people and generic Scottish culture that we control, this is a misconception. So, you know, where are the Gaels in this picture? As I said, their cultural assets, things like the tartan kilt, were appropriated by the elite, the English-speaking elite, and then used by them and refashioned for their own agendas, which had nothing to do with Gaelic culture. And finally, why are Highland Games and tartans our only method for culture survival? Why isn't language and culture a part of this? It doesn't have to do with being xenophobic or looking to the past. Every culture has a set of ideas and ideals and values which guides its future, whether this be, you know, the guiding principles of Stephen Harper or, you know, what have you. So, you know, Gaelic culture is not about, you know, some antiquated group of people living in stone houses. It's a set of values and a language and literary tradition, and any group of people who values what their culture is wants to make sure that those values and language and other things are represented in how they put forward their future. And, you know, with that, I suppose. And then the idea that the Scots are somehow born losers who lived in a terrible country. Come on, give me a break. You know, our ice Icelanders born losers because they live in a cold country, which is worse off than Scotland in terms of natural resources. But you don't see like tons of Icelanders all over the place in North America. The fact is, Scotland was put in the circumstances it was because of being next door to an empire. It has nothing to do with being inherently a problematic people or country. Thank you.
Okay, Lockie.
Well, I think I should speak maybe a bit about what the Office of Gaelic Affairs is doing, which I didn't speak directly to because I tried to address the questions that were put before the esteemed panel and talk a little bit about my thoughts on them. The Office of Gaelic Affairs is really mandated. I think initially we were mandated to try to reconnect people to their language, specifically. And what we're realizing is that in the process of reconnecting people to their language, we're reconnecting people to themselves, to who they are, to their local communities, to the expressions that the local speech, the local cultural aesthetics. In other words, what kinds of cultural expressions these local communities have. And in that sense, I wouldn't say, it's probably unfair to say we're rebuilding communities, because that sort of gives the impression that there was no community there to begin with. But I think we're certainly assisting in the process of empowering communities and creating a sense of something greater than ourselves. And so to that point, I challenge the point of view that for example, Highland Games or Scottish societies are the only method of transmission of culture. And what I see happening in the Gaelic community, and I think perspective is very important. If we go back 20 years to when I was involved as a student here at St. X, I could count on my hand the number of Gaelic speakers that I knew at my age. I have to take my shoes and mitts off and everything now to count the number of Gaelic speakers that are much younger than me. What does this tell us? That there is an emerging Gaelic speech community. What does that mean? It means that people feel that there's something valuable about this language, that it connects them to their province. It connects them very much personally to their families, and it connects them to expression that is rich. It's as rich as any tradition in Western Europe that we know in terms of story, song, music, dance, and these are very powerful things when they come together and they become a definition of who and what we are here in this place. And so I do see something happening within the Nova Scotia Gaelic context that is a phenomenon that I have not seen in 20 years. The other point that I would like to say is I'd like to commend Irene on a number of points which I think are valid, which is that in that context of Gaelic cultural expression are all those things that you referenced: a sense of hospitality, a sense of honoring who and what we are now, but looking at our tradition bearers as having given us so many riches that are of importance. I think that Dr. Newton is correct. I think that there has to be a sense of leadership around how, for example, the Gaelic community can partner, collaborate, work with Scottish societies, Highland Games events. One of the very neat projects that I was involved in this past year was the Great Book of Gaelic. It was the best experience I ever had, and it was simply artworks with Gaelic poems associated with them, going back 1,500 years, from both the Irish Gaelic and Scottish Gaelic tradition, placed in storefronts on the main street of this town. And I had the privilege of walking with groups up and down Main Street during Highland Games and talking about the rich tradition that was presented through those pieces of art. And I raised that particular initiative because I think that is a great example of what can be done to raise awareness, appreciation, respect, and value around this language and culture that is absolutely brimming with richness. What else was I going to say, Dean? I understand Tom's point around authenticity, and I don't dispute it. In my sense, I can go back 10 generations to where my ancestors came from in Scotland. I have a Gaelic-speaking father. I had a Gaelic-speaking granduncle. In my view, they told me about their lives. It was as authentic to me as anything. It has enriched me greatly, and I feel that has every bit of importance in modern day society for me as a Nova Scotian, as a Gael living in Nova Scotia, and I respect the authenticity of the other Scottish traditions that I don't necessarily take an active part in, but I see that they have an origin and that they have a role to play, and I'd like to see how we both could work in the future to understand where each other is coming from and find ways to promote